back to Black Power Blueprint Live, broadcasting every other Tuesday. My name is Jamie Simpson, and I'm a member of the Black Power Blueprint Reparations Committee here at the beautiful Aquaba Hall at the Uhuru House, 1245 18th Avenue South in St. Petersburg, Florida. And tonight we have an amazing show focusing on the question of mass incarceration that is imposed on African people inside the country, the United States borders. And the U.S. has the largest prison population in the world. So we're going to be talking about how the Black Power Blueprint addresses the prison question. And we also will be discussing the question of the African Independence Workforce Program later in the show. Featuring tonight, we're honored to be joined by T'Challa Masimba, one of the project coordinators of the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis, Missouri, as well as Abdullah Alexander and Malika Alexander, also based in St. Louis. And as often, I am honored to be joined by the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess, who chairs the organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of the African People's Socialist Party created for white people, extending the African Revolution into the white community. Uhuru, Comrade Penny Hess.
Uhuru, Jamie. Looking forward to the show tonight. It's going to be really powerful.
Very, very important topic, very important times. And we want to thank everyone who has joined us tonight and encourage you to subscribe at Black Power Blueprint YouTube page. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to get notifications. You can also like us on Black Power Blueprint Facebook page, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and please share this live stream far and wide. Tonight, as always, we want to begin by saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the founder and leader of the Uhuru movement, chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, the visionary leader who has been struggling for the absolute liberation of Africa and African people under the leadership of the African working class for over 50 years, as well as our leadership, Deputy Chair Ona Zene Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, who did so much to build this Black Power Blueprint vision. And we're going to go right now to an amazing video put out by the Black Power Blueprint on the current project. Let's show a video of Deputy Chair Ona Zene discussing the Jiko Kitchen in St. Louis.
Now we're at the future home of the Uhuru Jiko Kitchen at Goodfellow Boulevard. What is your vision, DC Ona, for this space?
Okay, first I want to say that Jiko is a Swahili word that means kitchen. So this is going to be a licensed commercial kitchen and cafe and bakery. So we're sitting in this beautiful space where people will be able to come in and purchase the African comfort food as well as our amazing Uhuru foods and pies. This is going to serve as our community licensed commercial kitchen where people can come and prepare their food. They have a licensed commercial kitchen or a venue for them to be able to jump off and start their own business. In the back of the building, we're going to house a classroom that's going to be for the African Independence Workforce Program that's going to be dealing with the mass incarceration of African men and women who come out of prison and really don't have an opportunity to go back into society to work. We're going to be teaching them how to be owners of their own future, how to own their own businesses. We also have a space where we're going to be doing our distribution, and this is where the trucks can actually come into the gate, pull up into our building and drop off all the goods and services that we need to, be able to have our products on site at all times. So another feature of this amazing building is, of course, the outside, where we're going to be doing our own garden, where we're going to be growing our own food that's going to be prepared in our own kitchen. And also it's going to serve as a venue for seating. We're going to have seating on the outside, and we're going to have entertainment.
All right. Welcome back to the Black Power Blueprint Live. What an amazing video about the Uhuru Jiko, Chairwoman Penny.
Yes, powerful video, and I'm really excited to be able to have a very profound and what I think is going to be a deeply moving and inspiring program tonight. I do want to join in saluting T'Challa Abdullah and Malika, who are over in St. Louis, and we're gonna be going over to St. Louis in just a minute. But I just want to say a couple more things that we have to understand about the Black Power Blueprint. First of all, I do want to join in saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who leads the African People's Socialist Party, which leads the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people that the party strategically placed inside the white community to be the voice of the African Revolution in whiteface. The struggle for Black power in whiteface, which is a really brilliant strategy and something that APSC is continuing to build and to work on, and that we also fight for building a culture of white reparations to African people. And it's just going so well. We're building, and especially through the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, our mass organization under the leadership of Jesse Neville, who's with us here in the audience today, also under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, going into the white communities everywhere, building this amazing stand of white reparations to African people. So we want to also salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, who was just so excellent on that video.
Yes.
And to just say that Deputy Chair Onezene leads all the economic work of the African People's Socialist Party, including 30 institutions,
wow,
economic institutions of the party in just so many places all over the United States. And there's just so much. In fact, we need to have a Black Power Blueprint video just on that. We need to really just talk about all of those different institutions, and we will do that. But the Deputy Chair Onezene is the one who leads this project of the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis. And she went into St. Louis and began buying abandoned and city-owned abandoned empty buildings that were in a dilapidated state, and just created this program where, with your support, the African People's Socialist Party has been able to renovate buildings and put programs in place that has just given new life to the African community of the north side of St. Louis in such a powerful way. And I want to salute that, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit more. But one of the things, the major projects that has come out of that has been the Uhuru House, the development of the Uhuru House at 4101 West Florissant Avenue in St. Louis. You can go to our blackpowerblueprint.org website. You can see videos. You can see the incredible and very rapid transformation of that building. All the volunteers, all the African contractors, just all the people who were involved in making that and seeing the stake that the African population and the community there in St. Louis has in that. And this whole project has included the demolition of condemned buildings across the street from the Uhuru House to make way. And by the way, demolition is not cheap, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And that successfully happened several months ago to make way for the One Africa, One Nation marketplace there. And the Black Power Blueprint was able to install a magnificent 50-foot flagpole with a 25-foot flag that flies from there. And there's many videos, beautiful videos, at blackpowerblueprint.org that you can watch of that flag going up. So it's very powerful. So, this is all that's happening and more. The party is also working on the African Independence Workforce Program and renovating a fourplex building to house African people coming out of the colonial prison system, and just doing so much more, renovating a beautiful, beautiful building on Goodfellow Avenue that is going to be transformed into the headquarters of Uhuru Foods and Pies, a cafe, a bakery, and so much more. So, we're going to be talking about some of that tonight and what it means politically for this to be able to happen. But last year we raised over $65,000 from these weekly webinars with your support and your participation by going to blackpowerblueprint.org and donating, and it just was a tremendous outpouring of support for this incredible project. So right now we're working on a goal that began on January 1st that's going to the end of March of $20,000. We have raised $3,035 in this month, and we have a goal tonight to raise another $500. So we want to raise $500 tonight. So if 10 people, well, we've actually raised $50 so far. So we want to thank Lisa Watson for that donation tonight. It's really powerful. But if, let's see, 9 people would give $50, we would easily make our goal. And of course, we can go over our goal, and we need to do that as well.
We've done it before.
Yes, we have. And we certainly want to remind you again to go to blackpowerblueprint.org to see videos, to see testimonies, and to donate. Just, contribute right there to the programs of the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis.
Absolutely. It's not difficult to do, and it's such a historic thing. I mean, everything that you described about the African People's Solidarity Committee, you can't find an organization like this, with this sort of vision. And as we saw in the video, one of the most important projects coming up is the Jico Kitchen, being renovated right now on Goodfellow Avenue, as you said. That's going to be the national office of Uhuru Foods and Pies, and the headquarters, yeah. And a bakery. And there's been a bakery in this organization before. This is not something new.
No.
So we want to thank everyone who's helped make that reality. And encourage people to start, as I want to echo what Chairwoman Penny said, to continue going to blackpowerblueprint.org and make a generous donation. If you're a white person, make a stand of reparations with the African Liberation Movement, with self-determination and economic independence for African people. It's absolutely critical, and we really appreciate Lisa Watson for having already contributed. Be like Lisa. Uhuru. And if I'm not mistaken, at this time, we're going to turn it over to Chichawa Masimba, live from St. Louis's Aquaba Hall. Uhuru Chichawa.
All right, Uhuru, I want to welcome everybody to the Uhuru House in Aquaba Hall. And I just want to really recognize those who are responsible for this whole process. And we've said it, and I don't think we can repeat it enough. This is the product of a long, historical, genuine struggle for the freedom and liberation of African people all over the planet. And that has been waged by none other than Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So I want to recognize that. And Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela, who put this institution on the ground and who leads all of the economic work and all of the economic institutions in our entire organization. And that consists of nearly 30 programs and institutions. So I want to recognize that. I think it's significant. And I think it's significant that she is this model of women, African women leadership. And by my side, I want to introduce both comrades Malika Alexander to my right, and Abdullah Alexander, who will join us later, and who will give us some information based upon their understanding of this whole prison system. And they have a real stake in this question. So we really look forward to hearing from them. When we talk about this prison system in the U.S. in particular, as was stated earlier, I believe, the United States has more people in prison than the entire country of China, which has 3 times the population of the U.S. And that's profound. You have this whole China, great big China, with 1 billion people, has less people in prison than the U.S. And, in fact, China only has, I believe, 30 juvenile prisons, while the U.S. has 2,000 juvenile prisons. And so I think that we have to really treat this question of mass imprisonment seriously. We have to ask what is happening, and we have to understand this process, because it's not just a question of lack of body cameras for police officers, and it's not purely a question of some prison corporations making money. There's something fundamental that we have to understand. So I think that this gives us an opportunity to address that. So I want to go back to the colonization of the U.S., of what will become the United States. So 1640 in Virginia, you had the story of an African, and you don't hear this story a lot, but this African, his name was John Punch. And he was brought here in chains, and they like to say that we were indentured servants at first. But if you come here in chains, you're not an indentured servant. But he came here, and he was forced to work along two white indentured servants. And they decided to escape. And in that process, they were captured, and the two white indentured servants were given additional time on their indentured servitude, while John Punch was given life. And this was the first, many believe this was the first legalized, codified slavery of African people in this country, although we recognize that this process began in the 1400s with the Portuguese. So I think it's just real significant that we understand this relationship between prison and slavery, and that we see at the onset of the colonization and enslavement of African people, you see this disparity in sentencing between these two white indentured servants and this African. So when you look at Virginia, which was the first colony here, Virginia had a governor. It was actually before that, it was set up as a corporation. And that corporation had a governor. That governor was appointed by a board who was the British crown, or shareholders in Britain. The community in Britain was not just a neighborhood that people came to live at, it was a plantation. That was the community itself. And the enslaved Africans were the workers, and eventually you would have the white workers essentially become the managers. So you have this whole process underway, and it didn't happen neatly because somebody just thought about it per se, but this is the system that evolved. And so you had these plantations, and multiple plantations would become a town, multiple towns would become a city, multiple cities would become a county, multiple counties would become a state. And in this process, you would have these entities merge together as the ruling class would look to consolidate power. So you have these various governors, they want to work together to consolidate power between themselves, and they would consolidate these towns into cities, and cities into counties, etc. And they would govern the political system. And so you had this whole process underway. And then, so anytime you have a social system, and this is where we really get into why we have prison systems. Anytime you have a social system where you have a group of haves and a group of have-nots, and the haves have what they have and get it at the expense of the have-nots, you have to create an entity of force and coercion to back up that relationship. And that entity is what we refer to as the police. It is also the courts. It is the prison. It is the military. This is what we refer to in history as the state. It's a mechanism of coercion and force that is imposed on a population that is exploited for the benefit of another population. So we know that the first police in this country were what they call slave patrols. So that's how this system inside the U.S. has its origins, but that's a general rule that police are not something that are universal in human society. You don't have anything called a police all throughout human history. It's something that comes into existence at a certain point in history. So I think that that's important for us to really look at where this whole process comes into existence. And also in this process, you have something else beginning to occur. You have the consolidation of white identity in this process. So you begin to see the notion of white people coming to define themselves as such. And throughout the world, you begin to see the tribes in what would become Europe define themselves as a one national entity with one identity. And so everywhere, this state comes into existence to defend this system that is built on slavery and colonialism. And so that's the economic base. It is an economic base of through which white power comes into existence. So we really wanted to touch on that. Initially, the slave system that we see inside the U.S. the police system that we see inside the U.S. had its origins in Barbados, where they really began to militarize their police as they wanted to, maintain this whole plantation system. And then eventually this practice was moved to South Carolina, where Africans began to outnumber whites. And so 1671, Africans become half of the population, and by 1708, we began to outnumber whites in South Carolina. So then we see the slave codes come into existence shortly after that to codify and to law the aggression that the plantation slave class wanted to enforce. And then eventually these slave patrols would militarize and consolidate with the military, and now you have a whole militarized force. And eventually they get uniforms, and so they get professional, they professionalize this whole process. So you see this whole process of consolidating this force, this entity of coercion and force into something called police, into prison systems in general. And you see this whole process where they begin to legitimatize this process from mob violence to a standing military with uniforms and protocol, and that is meant to obscure the whole process, to obscure the relationship that this force has to the community. So I wanted to say that as well. I just wanted to look at some other statistics. There are over, as I stated, there are over 2,000 children's juvenile prisons in the U.S., 30 in China by comparison. And the number of children and youth in prison in the U.S. is 66,000, while you have 95,000 youth who are locked up in adult prison. So that's over 160,000 youth in prison. And then, 60% of the people, all people who are in prison in this country, are in prison for drug offenses. And so, most of that is through crack cocaine, which we know is a substance that was imposed on the black community by the U.S. government. And so they imposed it on the community, and then they gave us higher sentences for anytime, an African would get caught with crack as opposed to cocaine. And now we see that weed is becoming legal in many states, and you have these scores of African people in prison. So, law then, we recognize law is just the opinion of the ruling class. Anytime slavery was legal. And so you have a whole system built upon the illegalization, if you will, of the behavior of African people and the legalization of the behavior of the white ruling class. So, we really wanted to just touch on that. And, I wanted to turn it back over and just say that when we are here on behalf of the Black Power Blueprint, and this is a program designed to bring self-determination to African people through economic development institutions. And so we think it's critical that we really struggle and, fight to build these economic institutions and put them in the hands of the African working class. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Oh, we really want to salute and thank T'Challa Masimba and all the comrades in St. Louis. That was a powerful overview.
And we're going to be coming back. We'll be going back to St. Louis in just a few minutes, but I want to join in saluting that profound overview, Jamie. And I thought that, it just really laid the whole basis for the context of the mass imprisonment of African people in this country, and really everywhere that African people are around the world. I just wanted to start by saying that this past week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela spoke at Oxford University, which is a colonial, part of the British Empire, part built on colonialism. And the chairman's debate, he was part of a debate, and the debate was about whether Africa should have a, quote, closer union, and, whether there should be one Africa, one nation. And, there were 3 people on his team, including him, including the chairman, and 3 people on the opposition side. But the chairman single-handedly won that debate. It was really powerful. He was electrifying. And look for a video that shows the chairman's presentation and gives it in the context. And in the next few weeks, that's going to be coming out, and I'm very excited. Hopefully, we're going to have Chairman Omali Shatella back on this program again to sum up that and other things. But I just wanted to go back to what Tacharo was talking about, because he makes it clear that it is not racism inside this country, that we live in a colonial situation in which there are two Americas, in which the white population sits on the pedestal and has everything that we have at the expense of African people on the stolen land of the indigenous people. So, this doesn't, the kind of state that Tacharo was talking about, that African people face, not just police gunning down young African people or rounding up African people with with a completely different set of things that become law, quote unquote, used against African people, as opposed to what white people face. But the fact is that it's a whole life of colonialism inside the borders of the United States. And to me, that makes so much sense.
It does. And
talking about, that there's more people in prison in the United States than any other country in the world. And as Charo said, China has 3 times, it has over 1 billion people, I think something like 1.3 billion people inside of the borders of China, but it only has like 150,000 people or something like that. Some very low, maybe 1 million, we can look that up, but very low compared per capita to what the U.S. did, but yet the U.S. is always talking about the human rights violations in places like China.
And even the number of prisons for children in particular, the juvenile prisons, and that we have more prisons in the United States specifically for children. And that's not even including the number of schools that are like prisons, that function like prisons within the school system.
Because it's a colonialism inside the borders of the United States. And that's why, for us as white people, we can recognize that everything that we have, as we said, it's sitting on this pedestal on the backs of African people and oppressed and colonized people around the world. And so everything we have is stolen. And so therefore, we owe reparations. We owe reparations, and that this is a positive stand that lets us really turn loose our whiteness, that lets us jump off this pedestal and join in genuine solidarity with African people and be part of humanity for the first time. I do want to say that we have a $150 donation tonight from Valerie Bronte. So that means we've raised $200, and we're going to surpass our $500 goal tonight. Absolutely. And I want to say that from the African People's Solidarity Committee, we're going to put in $50 tonight. So that will bring us to $250, which will be halfway to our goal. And we do that as a stand of reparations and just tremendous support for the Black Power Blueprint, the right of the African working class to have power in their own hands. So, this is the future that I know that we want to be part of, a future in which African people can have power over their lives. This is not about charity. It's not about a favor. This is not an NGO or a nonprofit or anything like that. This is African working class taking power in their own hands, calling on genuine solidarity from the white population and from anybody that wants to see African people free, and the struggle that the African People's Socialist Party is making to bring all oppressed and colonized peoples with them in a victory and defeat of U.S. imperialism and the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere.
And the death of colonialism, of this nightmare of colonialism that Comrade Tacharo laid out so well in talking about the origin of the police. You heard this discussion after Mike Brown was murdered in Ferguson, not far from where the modern Uhuru House is now on West Florissant.
Right.
And there was a lot of talk about the police being militarized, like that was a new thing. And I just really appreciate how clearly he laid out that they were militarized from the very beginning. When you have a situation of forced labor, where the Africans enslaved on stolen land outnumber the white overseers, of course you have to have military enforcement of that. Of course you have to have the most brutal kinds of patrols that white people in general took part in.
And we don't, we don't experience the state in the raw, violent form that it takes in the face of colonialism. That there are two ways, again, that the police act and carry themselves out. One towards the white community, which could be friendly or helping old ladies across the street or getting a kitten down from the tree. And you actually, if you watch TV news, they usually have some kind of segment at the end of the news that shows the cops going up or the fire department
the latest
in
one,
a tree getting one down.
Today they announced how a cop saved a dog drowning from water.
Yeah, there you go, a dog. But they gunned down African teenagers and young people or old people. They terrorized the African community. It is a completely different experience because colonialism shows and exposes the raw, brutal, violent face of what the system, white power, and imperialism really is about. And we are sheltered from that. And therefore, we condone it, we participate in it, we carry out the violence against African people as well. So this is a stand to end that, to say we want to end our relationship as, connected to white power and carrying out its interests and stand in solidarity with African people. And we just want to say that we also have $25 from Allison Haney tonight. All right. So we only have $225 more. So we are going to surpass our goal tonight, absolutely for sure. But somebody could just put in that $225 right now if they wanted to.
Send a message loud and clear.
We could go ahead and go towards $1,000 tonight, which is what we really need to do.
Those are the kinds of numbers that the African liberation movement deserves. And we're going to get there. And every time a white person, I've said this before, and I think it's significant, every time a white person makes a stand of material solidarity with this organization, with African liberation, it sends a message loud and clear to our own ruling class that they cannot depend on us to be this rear guard of support for the worst kinds of colonial violence that happened to African people, indigenous people, and colonized people all over this planet to sustain the lifestyle that we've come to take for granted. So if you're one of those people, I encourage you to take on the challenge that Chairwoman Penny has just put out. Help us get to that goal and surpass us by going to blackpowerblueprint.org and donating as generously as you can, or paying as much in reparations as you're able to tonight.
This question of reparations, it's like really, it's become a household word. People know what it is.
Yeah, and that was a party strategy.
Exactly.
Right?
Right. When they held the first tribunal on reparations for African people way back in 1982, the party had the goal to make reparations a household word, and indeed it is and has been for a long time. But you see more and more of these kind of groups of white people popping up around the question of reparations, but just seeing it as a way to buy dinner for African people, for a single person. And this is nothing like that. I just want to be really clear. This is about turning back over stolen resources into the hands of an organization of the African working class that is absolutely dedicated to the liberation of African people and is using the resources to build institutions for dual and contending power and for economic development for the African community here and all around the world. And so this is part of a revolutionary strategy. It can make you feel better to buy dinner for somebody, but that's not what this is about. This is saying that we want to play our role in the African Revolution, which is to go back into the white society, unleash all those stolen resources, and turn it back over to the people who rightfully own it.
Right, yeah. I've heard you describe it before as not a social relationship. This is a formal political relationship that we have the opportunity to have with the African working class in motion.
Exactly.
And the work speaks for itself. If you're wondering where the resources go, it is so very clear what this movement is about.
Yeah, and the party is organizing. I mean, again, the chairman just got back from London, and while he was there, the African People's Socialist Party in London held an amazing event led by Secretary General Louise Kinshasa. That was very, very powerful. The chairman, was in Johannesburg, South Africa, just a few months ago, where the party there held some amazing events and a whole tour. And I remember that one of the places that the chairman spoke at was Evaton, E-V-A-T-O-N,
okay,
in near Johannesburg. And I was just reading in a book about Marcus Garvey that Evaton was a very large Marcus Garvey, area where there were a lot of members there. So it's just continuing the struggle for African liberation, because African people in Azania are not free.
Right.
In South Africa are not free. Nelson Mandela did not, he was a neo-colonialist, and he did not free African people.
Yeah.
So, so go to blackpowerblueprint.org. We're going to make our goal tonight. Let's go ahead and make it. But I think we are going to go turn it back over.
Yes.
Unless you had something else that you wanted to talk about.
I just encourage people to continue going to blackpowerblueprint.org and remembering that this is about economic independence and how directly related that is to the damage the prison industry does to the black community.
Yes.
How devastated the African community is by this foul colonial prison system, and that this goes directly to concrete programs for African people coming out of these concentration camps, euphemistically called prisons, so they can get a job in their own community. They can get a job being part of their own liberation movement. And I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I want to thank the party and the Black Power Blueprint for having this available for us to unite with. And unless you had anything else, Chairwoman Penny, let's turn it over back to Comrade T'Challa, Malika, and Abdullah in St. Louis.
The Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru. All right, so I just want to thank everybody for the contributions to the Black Power Blueprint and for tuning in tonight. And I wanted to, we're going to talk to comrades Abdullah and Malika. And I just wanted to reinforce what was said earlier, that all societies are composed of two components. It is you have an economic base, which includes the relationships based upon how people relate to the means of production. In other words, who owns what? As a society attempts to feed itself, clothe itself, house itself, the critical question is, how is that done? And when you have a society where one group begins to capture the means of production and they hold it at the expense of another group, then you have this social system that is irreconcilably split. And the economic base that we are looking at is one built on slavery and colonialism. So that's one component. The other component is what we refer to as a superstructure. So that includes the political system, the legal system, the prison systems, all of this, what we even call religion and culture and ideology. Everything in a society will reinforce this basic economic relationship. So what we see in terms of how the police treat us when we walk outside and they pull us over and ticket us in Ferguson, in one of the 90-something municipalities that they have created, built upon the ability to generate revenue from ticketing us, that is a consequence of an economic system where one group, the white ruling class, lives at the expense of another group, and this is what we're seeing here. So when we talk about the laws, where they imprison us for weed one day, and then make it legal the next day, when they cook up crack cocaine and distribute it to our communities, and give us 10, 20, 30-year sentences for a small piece of crack cocaine, and then give this white person over here no time, parole, probation for a bag of cocaine. that's because you have a relationship of an economic base where you have one group of people living at the expense of another group of people. And all aspects of society will reflect and reinforce that if it's left up to the ruling class. But we're saying that we won't leave it up to the ruling class. We're telling you to join the Black Power Blueprint, to donate, to get involved, and so that we can overturn this relationship and we can do it at its base. So I wanted to say that, and I wanted to turn it over to Comrade Abdullah Alexander to talk about the impact that the colonial prisons have had on African families. There was a recent article in the New York Times that reported that every 100 African women and African communities in this country, for every 100, there are only 83 African men due to the mass imprisonment. So can you just talk a little bit about how this impacts our communities? And this is obviously a devastating thing, but we just want you to speak about that.
Yeah, Uhuru, yeah, this phenomenon has absolutely have a devastating, destructive mates to help to raise their families, to help to stabilize the neighborhood, to help to stabilize the communities is just devastating. And the fact that all these black men are absent, are not in the community is due to the fact that we are being heavily policed. We're being set up to fail. It's, like I said, a psychological impact is just absolutely devastating. You see all these, I spent 27 and a half years in prison for armed robbery, for trying to take back some of the resources that were stolen from my ancestors and from my family, that were stolen from my ancestors and my family, trying to get back some of these resources. I received 27 and a half years, but the people that stole it were lionized. They were made into heroes, how the West was won and how Africa was taken. And they show you the great white hunters going through Africa in their pristine white uniforms, and then show the Africans as savage and ignorant. But we were already cultured. We were already learning. We were already doing things that was socially and politically profound and historically profound. And we were doing a lot of things that has been hidden from us. But I want to go back to your question. I was waiting on the first question on this colonial system. That was the one I had anticipated, but you skipped to another one, you know. But this has had a devastating effect on the African community, that there's not enough men to go around because they're in prison, where they're suffering psychologically, emotionally, and just being under the naked boot of oppression. For 27 and a half years, I saw so many black men succumb to these drugs because they can't handle this naked oppression. You might get 20, 30, 40 years. And then they got a prison inside the prison called segregation for the uppity Negro, for the Negro that's trying to educate himself or try to better himself. And I was one of those so-called uppity Negroes because I tried to better myself. I tried to educate myself because I realized that something was wrong with me, that I had been messed up by this imperialist, colonialist system. Right? So I tried to change that so that I could be a better father, so that I could be a better provider. But once you've been snatched out of the community, even though you've changed your mind, even though you came to understand, you came to the grips of reality that, you need to be taking care of your children, you can't do it now because you locked up with all this time. And so, yes, it has had a devastating effect. If it weren't for my queen, Malika Alexander, coming to my rescue, 17 years into my incarceration, I don't know where I would be now. I know she helped me to get through this psychologically, to have some of the strong love of a black woman's support, to be there supporting you, coming to visit you, writing you letters with perfume on them. That helped to sustain me, but all the brothers don't have that. So some of the brothers got to turn to drugs, they got to turn to violence, they got to turn to gangs. And taking you out of this community, what they do is they build these prisons in these rural white communities. So they extracting the wealth from the inner cities out into the rural white communities. They building the prisons there, provide jobs for these white officers. That some of them hate your goddamn guts. And then they relish the opportunity to oppress you. They relish the opportunity to humiliate you. They relish the opportunity to embarrass you, to put the boot on you. And when your family come to see you, if they can make it 200 or 300 miles, sometimes they have you in these prisons 200 or 300 miles away from your family, so they may have to spend hotels in this community. They got to buy gas in this community. They got to vend. They got to buy food for you from the vending machines in this community. So it's further enriching the white community and extracting resources from the black community. So this is slavery again, just like you was talking about these tickets that they, so now it's enriching the white community. Now I'm able to build these institutions and stuff because I got you working for me. You got to work to pay these tickets off. So you my slave now. So it's a non-ending, continuous situation. That's why our struggle got to be non-ending and continuous, because they don't never get tired of oppressing. You got to get tired of being oppressed. Yeah. And if the people united, I want to say a slogan, the people united will never be defeated. This is why they work so hard to keep us disunited. This is why they work so hard to keep the community divided and at odds with each other. That's why they promote gangs. That's why they promote drugs. That's why they promote prostitution, right? They want you to be a prostitute. They want you to be a gambler. They want you to be a drug dealer so they can lock you up. This is why they do it. This is why they glamorize the Godfather and all these violent shows and stuff, so that you can try to emulate these characters and so they could put you in jail. So yes, it has absolutely had a devastating, and like I said, in some instances, irreversible impact on the African community, because the brothers and sisters that have died as a result of this system, you can't bring them back. So that impact has been irreversible. The brothers and sisters that have been driven crazy, insane by this system, you can't bring them back. You got some brothers in segregation washing themselves with feces, because they ain't had human contact in 10 or 15 years. They've been locked in a cage for 10 or 15 years because they refuse to bow down, right? So if when you treat somebody like an animal, don't be surprised if they become an animal.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I appreciate that, and that was so profound. And I want to turn to Malika Alexander. And Malika, as the saying goes, you did the time right along with your husband, and he just mentioned that. Can you talk about the toll that this had on you and your family, but also the toll that this kind of suffering has caused for millions of African families, of imprisoned African men and women?
Uhuru. The impact is far-reaching when you deal with a family that has a husband, a father, anybody that's incarcerated like that. I didn't know exactly what it was all about until I got in there, because it started off as I'm just supporting my man. But from the time I walked in the door, then I was a mark, because I had adopted a certain persona that I was taking in there with me, because as my husband said, people tend to associate certain things with people that are in prison. And I wanted everybody to know that I'm not that. And so that is how, but part of the struggle at first was just dealing with telling people that my husband's in prison. The stigma that goes with that. What? What? You're doing what? Well, yeah, I'm doing that because I love my husband. And because I'm supporting him, and I took that as my responsibility. He had enough negativism going on in there. So I made it my responsibility to bring that bright spot, that smile, that one piece of however long we had to visit, to bring that joy, laughter, whatever, into the situation for them 4 hours, that he could forget, where he was, and focus on us. It was my choice to try to make sure that I kept him relevant to our family, relevant to people in our community, relevant to the struggles of that other women go through when their husbands are incarcerated. But I think that my real indoctrination into the struggle came when I went to visit him, and one of the officers that had been giving him problems was in charge of the visiting room. And at that time, I was traveling from Texas to see him. And usually when you do that, if you go through all the rules and everything, then you can, get extended visits and everything. So this officer was really rude and rude. And so there ended up being some words. But what I remember most about that is that they came and got my husband from the table with me, and they took him out and they were going to take him to segregation. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, I really want to cry right now. But my heart wanted to cry, but the revolutionary in me said, no, you can't cry right now. So when they took him out, I followed them. I'm not supposed to do that, but I did. I followed them to the door. I watched as they I was there. I saw what happened. Let me tell you firsthand. And so that was my first um, struggle, I guess, in the system, just um, going in and seeing when they bring your husband out to visit and seeing him chained hand and foot. And you have to smile. I mean, again, you want to cry, but I didn't do that. When they brought him in the room, I was, hey, baby, how are you? Because that's what he needed from me. And so I do my crying at home, not here. And so I think that is part of what made our relationship as strong as it is, that we were able to withstand. We went through a lot of things. I've been wearing natural Afro hair a long time. They would search my hair when I came in. I had another very personal thing where they took me in the restroom to search me. I mean, I've been through some stuff. And so the way that they really don't want to see Black families together. And so they would make it hard for you to be able to come in and to visit and to, have a nice time. When you walk in the door, then they ask who you come to see. And when I say his name, no, I don't want his name. I want his number. Well, I refuse to do that. I'm going to tell you his name first. Then I'm going to give you his number, because I didn't wear a number. And so in the Department of Corrections, they are very familiar with me, because I refuse to bow. I refuse to, go along with the status quo and all that kind of stuff, because it's hard enough when he's not at home. It's hard enough when we first started, phone calls were $35. $35 for 15 minutes. They've soon dropped that down, but by the time you get finished paying for phone calls, paying for visits, paying for vending, and all of that stuff, then you've having to take resources now out of your family, and you have to put it towards this, because this is the only way that you can enjoy some social time with your husband, but you do what you have to do. And that's what I did. And so the impact that I saw on families is prisons are not kid friendly, and as my husband said, sometimes I was driving 2 hours one way to a prison to visit him. Rain, shine, sleet, or snow. But they would drive buses from Chicago to that prison up there to bring mothers and their babies to supposedly visit. But after they rode those 5 hours, then sometime they would get them up there and where if they were supposed to be able to visit 4 hours, if there were a lot of people up there, they might get to visit one. And so then the babies are crying, they got to leave their dads. They just got there. The mothers are frustrated because, they've waited all this time to be able to go and visit with their man. And now all of a sudden this is cut short because the system has no sympathy for the fact that this is a family and they need time to bond because he's not there. So you just got to make it do what it does. And so it's a sad situation, but it is one that I have taken to speak on any chance I get because the Black family is important. The Black man is important. And if we don't, that's a resource, believe it or not, that carries a seed. I know I carry life, but we don't have no life without a seed. And so, it's important that, people begin to realize that these families need to have time to come together. The fathers need to have time to be able to talk with their sons. I don't care if they're behind bars. They still need to hear from their fathers. I needed to hear from my husband at times, and he would tell you that I made it my mission I wanted them to know that he was the most loved brother in the Illinois Department of Corrections. One day he called me and he said, "Girl, do you know how many letters I got from you today? Just today." And I said, "What? 17?" Because what I would do is I would write letters as if I was talking to him. If I had something to tell him, I would just write him a letter and I would mail it. And sometimes I think they would hold his letters and everything, and then he would get them all at once. But it's a sad state of affairs, when you cannot, honor your marriage, honor your family or anything because the system won't let you. Because they got all these rules in place, and I have to be humiliated before I go in to see him. Then when I get in there, now I've lost that smile for a moment. And then when he looks at me, because he knows me, he knows something wrong. But then if I tell him what happened to me coming in, then he's going to be upset. So it's really, I saw it over and over and over and over again. The women that I would see that I don't think anybody came as frequently as I did, but the women that I did meet along the way, just to hear their stories. Our stories are pretty much the same, that we're just trying to hold it down, trying to keep it together, and trying to get the brother home.
Yeah, that is really, really, really profound. And I know a lot of times in families, we end up blaming ourselves. So that creates a whole set of contradictions within the family because we don't always have an explanation that we have seen here today. And, one thing I think about when I hear from Malika is, this whole slave system in the U.S. was really defined through the woman. In fact, one of the first law that really began to codify into law who would be considered a slave, it said that the child would serve or would become a slave enslaved according to the conditions of the mother. So while we often associate the brutality of force with African men, African women deal with it too, but it was through the wombs of African women that, that their children would come out defined as a slave. So even in a patriarchal society, it was African women who on the law books were considered the person of reference to determine who would or would not be a slave in this society. So if she had a child by a white enslaver, that child would be a slave because it came through this woman. If she had a child by a so-called free African, that child would be a slave because it was defined by having come through this woman. And as Comrade Columbayi always says, African women's wombs became a factory for the production of slaves. So just appreciate, the strength and unbelievable resistance that you demonstrate. So I know we have a few minutes left, only a few minutes left for this section. I wanted to give Abdullah Alexander one more opportunity to just give us a sense of the employment obstacles that Africans face when they leave prison, and what that does to communities and individuals and families.
Wow. Yeah. It's a hard road to hoe. Getting out of prison, they want to know, have you ever been convicted? So when you say, yeah, I've been convicted, you're not even going to get interviewed, So it was the way that I got hired was, is not a way that anybody else but me was going to get hired. A guy was looking for somebody to slaughter chickens. As a Muslim, that's what makes them halal or lawful for Muslims to eat. And so I happened to be available. But if I hadn't been a Muslim, if I hadn't been available, then he wouldn't have hired me. He hired me because he needed me. He was desperate for somebody. He was desperate for somebody. So I took the job, making $9 an hour, slave wages, because I want to feed my family. And this is the only work that I don't know how many places I went to, baby, looking for a job, but I'm going to take care of my family. It's like my woman, my queen held me down while I was in prison. There was no way I was going to get out of prison and not hold her down, So, whatever it took and whatever it takes, I shovel snow, I rake leaves, I cut grass, I sell books. I'm an author. I wrote a book. I sell that book. I go to door to door because I'm not going back to prison. That's not prison. It's not an option for me. Prison is not an option for me. So what I want to leave everyone with is that, these brothers that's incarcerated and increasingly these sisters that's incarcerated, we need your help and we need your support. Don't abandon us in these prisons. Don't abandon us to go crazy in these prisons. If you got a brother in prison, write him every once a month, because you don't know the joy on a person's face when they get a letter from a loved one that they haven't heard from in so long, when they get a money order so that they could go buy some noodles or something to eat, so they don't have to go to the child hall and eat that garbage that they be feeding you, because they're not trying to sustain you. They just trying to get you from one day to the other. It's so raggedy now. They don't even provide you with underwear and clothes in the prison that I was in. They gonna try to give you some used underwear. So if you don't have no family or friends sending you no money, you out of there. Your situation is hopeless, more or less. So if you got, and there's many of us got brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, we got people incarcerated. So reach out for them people. And Malika brought something to my mind when she was talking. Do you know how many times she drove 2-3 hours to see me and they turned her around, but didn't even let her see me, didn't even allow her to see me, tried to say she didn't have on the right clothing? And how many of those sisters have drove from Chicago 6 and 7 hours? Oh, that's too tight. Then so they make you go to the store right there in their community to buy something else, further enriching them. This is how they do us. This is how they treat us. And we've seen where a white woman has come in with the very same outfit on that a sister was turned away for. So we got to stop doing this. And that's why I appreciate our Caucasian European comrades for standing in solidarity with us, because we need to know that you care. We need to know that there's some white folks that know that we being mistreated and that don't care, that don't mind putting themselves on the line, don't mind putting their reputation on the line. We need some John and Joanna Browns to stand with us, Uhuru.
Yeah. Uhuru. All right, give it up. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, don't abandon your brothers and sisters and cousins and fathers who are in prison. And that's a real message that we have to walk away with. I wanted to just close our end of this out by saying that, the first prisons in this country began largely around the writings in terms of them becoming formalized of a guy by the name of Jeremy Bentham, and they called it the Panopticon writings, where he began to write about how to institutionalize people. But prison itself, well, and I should also say that he was a admirer of Andrew Jackson, President Andrew Jackson, who was the person who began to push the indigenous population into concentration camps. And so he wanted to model the prison system based upon this legislation that forced the indigenous people into concentration camps that we call Indian reservations. And so prison has always been this process of just consolidating what is already existing in the general society for the oppressed people. So America was a big prison for the indigenous people before they were pushed into concentration camps, and it was a big prison for enslaved Africans before we were pushed into prisons. And later on in the 60s, when you saw this incredible revolutionary struggle, you began to see counterinsurgency develop, where the U.S. government determined that it was not only necessary to begin to target guerrillas, or what they would have previously done, target slaves. They want to target the general population, and they did that through two mechanisms. They wanted to do it through coercion and subversion. Coercion is aggression and force. That is the police. They wanted to put police on the front line in every African community, not just to target the revolutionaries or guerrillas, but to target the general population, to round you up, identify you, put you on record before you ever had a chance to become a revolutionary or to struggle against the system. And then the other aspect was subversion. So they want to throw money at a political elite that they can lift up who is sympathetic to the interests of the colonial state. And so we see all of these programs, including the first economic development corporations that came into existence in this country, to target social programs that allows the capitalist state and the U.S. government to pour money into the Black community, to target the leaders in the African community that they want to lift up, and do so at the expense of any kind of indigenous organization or struggle that might rise up to bring genuine solutions. So that's what we're up against. This is not an abstract-ish question. It's not a question of simply who was ushered into this prison system. You have a whole social system based upon counterinsurgency, where the general population is policed and targeted as a result of an economic system built on exploitation. So we wanted to say that it is critical that we support this African Independence Workforce Program. We have to go get these brothers and sisters out of these prisons. We have to intervene. We have to get them when they come out. And when we develop the capacity, we have to intervene before they ever go in, and we have to fight for them. My brother, my twin brother, and my father was in the same prison cell together. My first cousin was in prison with a uniform on that said property of the United States of America, and it had St. Genevieve County on it. It was the first county where Africans were brought to in this country. 500 enslaved Africans from Haiti brought to St. Genevieve County to work in the mines, and it's still a small prison town, making a living off of the enslavement of African people. So we have to do this. If you are watching, you have to donate. You have to join this. You can't sit on the sidelines and pursue a career at this point. Uhuru.
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 Uhuru. Kuchara, Masimba, Abdullah, and Malika Alexander. Wow. What an amazing
That was powerful.
Program. Yes.
I mean, I despise the system. And, I refuse to carry out the expectations of this government, that we should take this for granted, that this is the hell that African people have to go through in this country. And just the very powerful statements by Kuchara, Malika, and Abdullah, you can't be failed. I mean, we have to hear this. We have to look at this reality, and we have responsibility, because what the conditions are that are being described, that we just heard, are the conditions that make sure that white children and white families don't have anybody in prison. I read a statistic that they just did this survey that 65% of African people in the United States have a close family member in prison. 65%. And we've seen it where there could be, Chairman Omali Shatella could be speaking to an African audience and ask how many people have a close friend or relative in prison, and almost everybody raises their hand. That is the reality. You know, this is the gulag. This is what the U.S. talks about in terms of other countries or Russia or China, but this is what the U.S. does to African people inside the borders of the United States.
And if you do happen to see a white person in prison, they get out much more quickly. They don't suffer the same kinds of conditions.
No.
And that's
they go
borne
to
out.
different kinds of prisons, you know, prisons that have tennis courts in them and stuff like that, and have two kinds of sentencing. You know, the sentencing for Africans, 27 years. You know, Abdullah was in prison, and a white person probably would have gotten some kind of rehab program or whatever, you know, would be diverted into something else.
Their own statistics say this. They've been saying this for the 19 years that I've been in this movement. The Department of Justice itself says that an African person is, what is it, something like 9 times more likely to go to prison for life for the same drug offense as a white person. And that's in addition to the disparity between crack cocaine, which the U.S. government put in the black community to criminalize the black community. And I really want to unite with Comrade Valerie Bronte in New York, who
and we
stated,
have people to thank.
Yes,
too.
we do. Well, she just said in response to this, mass incarceration is genocide.
Yes.
And in this country, with respect to African people, that is absolutely correct. That's what it is. This separation of the families, the breakup of the family, and I think it's so important to see this human face. This is the African working class that they are imprisoning. It's no mistake. It's no coincidence that they target this revolutionary class that has the power to overturn this entire system, and have been doing so since colonialism was instated. But that kind of humiliation of the African family, of the partners, the wives, the children, is just disgusting and foul, and it constitutes something worse than psychological warfare.
The searches, the distance that people have to travel and then could be turned back, the kinds of things that Malika talked about, to disrespect African women and African men, and and just the inability to have employment afterwards, to be constantly serving your term, that you already served, you can't get over it. And I know the state of Florida has that penalty, what is it called, the convict thing, where they can't vote or they have no rights whatsoever. I think something like 2 million people in the state of Florida alone are facing that, and this is the conditions inside the borders of the United States. I want to thank some people who have have paid reparations tonight, who have really taken a stand, and I'm so excited to hear from Serena Bergstrom, $10 every month. So that's going to be recurring. And Serena said, I give $10 to a beautiful cause here. And that's a beautiful statement. Ronald Hudson gave $100 tonight.
Wow.
And Sad Uhuru. And we have Dina Gittleson, who gave $25 tonight. Dina said, this is a very great show tonight. Reparations are due to African people for mass imprisonment. Long live Chairman Omali Shatella and the leadership of the African Revolution. We want to thank Micah Del Rosario, $25 tonight.
Right,
Uhuru. And the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, $50. So this is really powerful. We've raised $485. We only need 25, actually I think we need 25 to go to get to our $500 mark. So we just need $25. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org and we can see what it means for the future of all humanity, for African people to have power in their own hands to end this system, to end this degradation, and for the brilliance and genius of the African working class to be able to contribute to a society in which all African people can benefit, can flourish, that little children grow up to be happy, not in fear, not missing their fathers and their mothers, and facing, prison themselves.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a country where we just said that 60,000 children, mostly African children, are in prison, many facing 30 years to life. 30 years to life when they're little children, sentenced to that in this country, and 90,000 African children in adult prison, where they're being terrorized and raped and everything else. That's why they do that. Not white children in adult prison. African children are in adult prisons. And this is the country we live in.
The same country where Ayanna Jones, 9 years old, murdered by the police, sleeping in her bedroom, or on the couch of her grandmother's house, shot dead. These are just the things that we know about. People like Sandra Bland, just trying to go to a job interview in Texas, and she was assassinated, essentially.
Well, we want to thank Diane Tournay, who just put in $20.
All right,
so that
Diane.
puts us at $505.
All right.
So we're over our goal, and we want to keep going
Yes.
because we owe reparations every day.
Yes.
Imperialism is doing this. This system is doing this every day to African people. And I think it was Abdullah who raised, just all of the wealth that the prison system puts into the, it's economic stimulus for the white population. It creates jobs, and the fact that a phone call costs $35, all these vending machines and all these things that Abdullah was talking about, that creates jobs and businesses for white people off the suffering of African people. How, can we live with this? We have to say that we want to join humanity, and a lot of white people are looking for the answer. What is it that we can do to rectify our relationship to African people? Because yes, we lynched African people. We were the slave catchers. We got everything, all of our jobs. Even being lawyers was tied to being slave masters. And everything, doctors and everything, insurance, every single thing is tainted and covered in the blood of African people. And if we want to rectify this relationship and our own participation in it, we can't just unlearn racism or something stupid like that. We have to return the stolen resources, and this is the opportunity to do it. And this is something that gives us the ability to be part of all of humanity in an honest way for the first time. And this is what the African People Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which are organizations of the African Revolution, of the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party, enables us to do for the first time. So reparations is a positive stand. It's a liberating stand for us. And I want to call on people to go ahead, go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Let's raise more. We need thousands of dollars for these projects to be able to take place for the party's, African People's Socialist Party's whole program of genuine economic development in the hands of the African working class, which is working towards the future of a total liberated Africa, all the stolen resources of Africa going back to it, the value of the stolen labor, a future without war, without suffering, without oppression, without little children being terrorized in the way that this system terrorizes African children inside this country and around the world. This is the world that we want. So, we just want to say, go ahead and go. Let's get up to $3,500 tonight. We're $5 less than, because we're going to put in $50. So we would be at $3,495. Let's get over it. Let's go to another $100 while we're on tonight.
Yeah, so, if you've donated already, consider donating a little more. Share this video far and wide, please. Whether it's now, whether you're watching it later and you like what you've seen, please share this. There is no other program like this that allows us as white people to reject this parasitic system. And that's exactly what the prison industry is. It is parasitism crystallized. When you hear about these little white towns, like the one where Malika had to go to visit her husband in prison, and she has to buy these an entire new outfit because some colonial overseer decides that so she goes to a store that's owned by some white person who's getting economic stimulus from this horrific genocidal concentration camp. And we can't stand by and let that happen. If we remain silent, if we just step back and say, well, I'm not sure where I come down on that, then we're uniting. We're uniting with imperialism. We're uniting with colonialism.
Yeah.
We have to reject it. We have to come down off this pedestal and start to whittle away as many other white people as we possibly can to take the same stand. And we do that by going to blackpowerblueprint.org and donating generously or paying reparations if you're a white person like us.
Well, we're just about over for tonight, but I just wanted to go back to Jarwa and anything else, any last words that you have for us tonight before we close out.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion, and I just wanted to, remind us that this social system that we've been talking about, that we refer to as capitalism and colonialism. Colonialism being the foreign domination of a people, socially, politically, and economically. That it came into existence as white power, and it dispersed us all across the world. And in the process, it obscured our national identity as African people. And we had, the fundamental thing is to recognize that this system rests on the oppression of African people and other indigenous and oppressed people as well. But this is the national identity of all of the dispersed people who are part of this process that we recognize as the state and as the prison system. And we are calling on people to understand that, what we really want to fight for African people to understand that we also have a particular class interest as the African working class. And we have to begin to see ourselves as the African working class. So you might be a plumber, you might be, you might work in home health care, but you have a whole social system that exists on your exploitation. And you have to recognize your class interests, and you have to make your life about defending your own class interests. And that's the fundamental thing. Karl Marx said that, you cannot simply lay hold of the ready-made state machinery and wield it for your own purposes. There are 500,000 or so local elected offices in this country, 511,000 or so. The U.S. military is the largest employer in the world. This is not a system that you can penetrate. It's not a system that you can change through moral persuasion. You have to change this thing by building dual economic institutions, building economic institutions that allow you to contend with the social system that is developed based upon your exploitation. So, we want to call for people to continue to donate, to reach out to blackpowerblueprint.org to find out how you can volunteer, and to write your brothers and sisters and parents who are in prison. And we have to really take this thing on and make our lives about defending our own class interests. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Salute the comrades in St. Louis. Thank you, Comrade Tacharwa.
Very powerful.
Yes, it's so important to do, as Comrade Tacharwa said, to become part of this process for white people as well. And if you're out there and considering it, I just want to reiterate, you can join the work of the Black Power Blueprint.
Yes, we'll put you to work.
You can send an email to join@blackpowerblueprint.org.
And we'll get you to the right place.
Yes, which is incidentally the same ending website that you need to go to if you want to make a contribution tonight, blackpowerblueprint.org. So we have a few announcements. Is there anything that you wanted to comment on before we get to that point?
Well, I just wanted to say that we will be back here next week for a great Black Power Blueprint program again, and this will be the beginning of African History Month. and we'll be talking about who Marcus Garvey was and the struggle for African self-determination. We'll have Director Akile Anai from the African People's Socialist Party on, as well as Janice Bryant and Ali Hutley, who work at the Uhuru Furniture Store in Philadelphia. And they'll be talking about, just their whole experience of working for one of the institutions of the broader Uhuru movement and just how exciting that is. So that's going to be a great show. Next week we'll be on at 7 o'clock Eastern. So we're going back to our earlier time. We'll be on at 7 o'clock Eastern next Tuesday night. So join us that.
Don't miss that. Right back, same place, but different time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we have some announcements coming up. In February and March of this year, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is holding its national All Diamonds Are Blood Diamonds, Africa's Resources in African Hands, Reparations Now, and the registration information for these events around the country is on uhurusolidarity.org. And for those who haven't heard yet, Uhuru means freedom. It's spelled U-H-U-R-U, solidarity.org. And there will be more events announced by the day featuring leaders of the African People's Socialist Party and the African People's Solidarity Committee. The first event is in Boston on Saturday. That is February 23rd from 3 to 5 p.m. at the First Church in Jamaica Plains. You can RSVP at blooddiamondsboston.eventbrite.com. Again, that's blooddiamondsboston.eventbrite.com. Among the events in St. Petersburg, Florida, from where we're filming, on March 14th, at the Uhuru House, right here, 1245 18th Avenue South. You can volunteer and help to build the All Diamonds Are Blood Diamonds tour by emailing info@uhurusolidarity.org and find out more about the events again by going to uhurusolidarity.org. And coming up on March 23rd and 24th of this year, an incredible organization, the African National Women's Organization, will hold its National Plenary or Planning Conference at the St. Louis Uhuru House at 4101 West Florissant Avenue. So go to anwouhuru.org for the registration information rather. Again, that's anwouhuru.org. Thank you.
And we are going to have Yejide Ornmila, who is the director of ANWO, on early in March. So
fantastic.
It's always amazing.
Stay tuned for that. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
Look forward to that one. And in April the 6th and 7th, the incredible Black is Back Coalition for Peace, Justice, and Reparations is holding its third electoral school at the St. Petersburg Uhuru House. And to find out more information about that, you can go to blackisbackcoalition.org for registration information. And that's just an incredible organization that the African People's Socialist Party is a leading part of. And April 13th and 14th, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is hosting or holding its national convention at the glorious St. Louis Uhuru House. You can find the registration information at that same website, uhurusolidarity.org. And Uhuru, just really want to salute all the comrades in St. Louis, Comrade T'Challa, Masimba, Comrade Abdullah Alexander, and Malika Alexander.
Thank you so much for being on. That was so moving and so powerful.
It really was.
Really outstanding.
It was such an essential part of a program like this to hear from the African working class, our leadership in the African People's Socialist Party, and from African people who have been so scarred by this system, but are continuing to build and create this incredible future. And I want to thank you, Chairwoman Penny Hess.
And I want to thank you, Jamie Simpson.
This is an incredible evening, and our wonderful studio audience, everyone involved with putting on the Black Power Blueprint, and of course our incredible viewership and donors who helped us reach our goal tonight.
All right.
All right.
Let's end with
Unity through reparations. Uhuru.
Uhuru.